Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast, to our annual mid-season review. Believe it or not, we are halfway through the calendar. We are 9 races gone, 9 to go. Firstly, I can't believe we're at this point already. It happens every season. Off-season is so long. You're waiting 6 months, St. Pete rolls around, and then suddenly you're here. And we're halfway through the season. Mind-blowing that we are at this point. We actually have less weekends because Milwaukee's a double-header, so we've had over half the weekends already this season. It's just mind-boggling to think about. So we'll speak about that in a second. But as always, we've got a few different categories to go over. We've got a few talking points, a few things to look out for the rest of the season. There's obviously a lot packed into our mid-season review as always. But yeah, as I said, I can't really believe we're at this point already.
I think it feels like it's come around even quicker this year as well, obviously having that really front-loaded start to the year, because you'd usually kind of be through Road America, mid-Ohio, and it'd kind of be the start of July, really, kind of start mid-July, but here we are mid-June, and yeah, pretty much what, we're 3.5 months since the season began, and this time in 3 months' time, the season will be done, which is not something it's worth really trying to think about. But yeah, kind of through May, and everything kind of flies by, and suddenly here we are 9 rounds in, and obviously there's the heck of a lot to look forward to still, but it does go by quickly, doesn't it?
And remember, at the end, we're going to have 6 races in 5 weeks to round out our season. So this is effectively the slow bit of the season where we have races 2 and 3 weeks apart whilst the World Cup's going on. Once the World Cup's over, the season just accelerates rapidly, and we're going to have race after race after race after race to cover. We're not really going to have many off weeks at this point. We already seem to have most of them up until this point. But as always, let's go on to our mid-season review. So we've got different categories just based on our thoughts on the first half of the year. We're then going to do a few predictions and just a few things to look out for the second half of the year. So kind of as you would expect from a mid-season review. Review of the first half, preview towards the second half. We always have a lot going on, and we've had a very wild season so far, as we always speak about, but let's get on to our drivers of the year. Now, typically, we've kind of done our top 1 or 2 drivers of the year, and typically, it's always been Palou in recent seasons, because that's just the way the championships has run with his dominance. And last couple of years, it's like, okay, we'll do the second best because Palou's always been the best. And then last year, it's like, well, Palou and Kirk would have been the top 2 best, so we'll do the third best this year. And then this year, it's like, well, Palou, Kirkwood, and Malukas have quite clearly been the top 3. So who are they, going to the 4th best feels a bit of a stretch. So what we've done and said this year is given our top 5 drivers of the year. We'll obviously give a word for Palou, Kirkwood, and Malukas right at the end, because just because it's so good doesn't mean we don't deserve to touch on them. But let's start off with our top 5 of the year. So Archie, do you want to start off with your 5th best driver of 2026 thus far?
Yes, number 5 for me is Joseph Newgarden. I think there's still some way to go for him in terms of, obviously returning to that championship winning form. But I think there's definitely been something of a resurgence this year, particularly obviously with the couple of short over wins, which I think was something of a statement, given that there's obviously been a lot of talk of Malukas this, Rasmussen that, kind of the new generation on ovals, and Newgarden's really just stamped his authority. And I completely kind of side with the point that he really still needs to improve on road and street courses. I think that 4th place finish at the Indy GP was certainly encouraging. I think there's also been other disappointments. The 500 obviously was disappointing, leading to the injury, but he somehow rebounded quite well from that and has gained a bit of momentum. Obviously, Detroit battling through to a top 10, and then picking up that second win at Gateway. So I think compared to last year, this has been a decided upturn for Newgarden. I mean, compared to the last few years, really, obviously 8th in the championship, then 12th last year. So it's just been an improvement. I don't think it's been spectacular, but he's avoided some of the bad luck. He's cut out some of the more errant performances. I think he looks kind of happier and more confident in himself as well. And I mean, he's already only 1 top 10 finish shy of his tally from the entirety of last season. We have 9 races remaining. So it's been much better. He's pushing to get back in the top 5 in points. And if he can finish higher than 5th, it will actually have been his best result in the championship since 2022. So yeah, step forward for Newgarden. Dan, I don't know whether you have agreed here.
I'm trying to go a little bit different. So not quite the same. Ultimately, I actually think fifth place is really hard because there's nobody really that obvious for me. There's not many people who've had good consistent seasons up to this point. A lot of people have been very choppy, and you have people coming outplaced in their standings. I'm actually going to go for somebody who I think is really outplaced in the standings, and believe it or not, that's going to be Scott Dixon, who lies 12th in the standings, just 4 points off Marcus Ericsson in 9th place. Now you might think, well, that's pretty crazy for a guy who's had 5 top 10s all year, but I actually think if you take the context of Dixon's season, it's a much better season than it is on paper. Indy 500 was in contention for the victory once again, kind of fell out of his hands through strategy and a couple of other things. Gateway last week was in contention for victory once again, fell out of his hands due to unfortunate timings of a yellow. St. Petersburg running probably easily for a top 10, if not top 5. Will comes out after a pit stop. That's another top 5 gone. And Detroit obviously running, competing for a podium. Could well have got a podium. Hybrid fails. That's his day done. And suddenly, though, you change those results where he's actually driven pretty well. It's just got unfortunate, and you're looking at him top 5 in the standings. So, yes, it might seem weird going for somebody a little bit lower, but I actually think if you look at the performances, he's driven pretty well, even if it's not to Scott Dixon's usual standards. And the season looks a lot different with not having out horrendous luck.
So Newgarden's got 2 wins. He's not in your top 5.
No.
Why?
Too many errors, too many inconsistencies. I think Phoenix, the win kind of fell into his hands when maybe he wasn't the best driver. Like Indy 500 was a pretty big error that he made. Arlington made another pretty big error. And I just don't think he's got the consistency in road street courses for me to say that he's been one of the top 5 drivers of the season so far.
Wow, that's a very bold pick, I would say, to go with Dixon.
Well, I've given my reasoning. Like, it might be a bit out there, but like
hypotheticals.
It's a lot of hypotheticals, but as I said, there's a lot of people I think who go in 5th who haven't had particularly good seasons so far. Like Newgarden's one of them who's been a bit too inconsistent round to round. Rahul's another one, again, good season, a bit too inconsistent round to round. O'Ward is another one, like consistent top 5s, but no podiums. And can you really reward that? Maybe I'm wrong with Dixon, but I just think maybe he's a guy who actually, if you break down the race by race, his season looks very different to currently where he lies in points.
So number 4, I'm guessing you've gone for willpower?
No, I haven't gone for willpower. A lot of it is his fault, so that's why it's different. I've got Christian Lundgaard in 4th. Again, I don't think he's actually had a superb season to this point, to be completely honest. I think he's had an okay, he's had a decent season. Like, he obviously was victorious in the GP in pretty good fashion. Kind of found his hands a little bit there. Obviously, a further 2 podiums in St. Pete and Barber. Was once again, as we were speaking about quite a lot, just beaten by Pelot, and Pelot so dominant, little he can do about that. So it's been an okay season. I still think he lacks consistency, which has let him down a little bit, which is why he's clearly not at the standard of Pelot, Kirkwood and Malukas in front of him in the championship. But I think Lundgaard's had a good season, maybe slightly better than last year. I think there's still work to be done. I think the McLaren package maybe isn't as good as it could be, but I think he's probably outperformed O'Ward in the first half of the year so far, which it ebbed and flowed quite a lot last year, but I think O'Ward's baseline tended to be stronger. I think Lundgaard's made a step up. Again, maybe the ovals he still lacks a little bit in comparison, but I think that the gain he's making in road street courses, he just continues to establish himself as the second best in the series behind Pelot from what we've seen so far this season.
Yeah, I'll side with you on this one, Dan. I think he just edges Newgarden for me because, I mean, he's got more podiums. He should have 2 wins, really. He's got another top 5 on Newgarden as well. And I agree, it's kind of similar to Newgarden, actually, in terms of where we need to see more from Newgarden on road and street courses, generally speaking. We do certainly still need to see more from Lundgaard on ovals, where, you know, he's been more kind of in the bracket of Nolan Siegel. Not that O'Ward's been exceedingly good, to be fair, on ovals this year, which I think does speak to the Aaron McLaren package, possibly even regressing, because I also agree with your point that this hasn't been like a great step forward from Lundgaard. It feels pretty similar to what we were looking at this time last year and saying, yeah, this guy's doing really well. But I think by this point of this season, you were expecting maybe them to have kicked, and this is Aaron McLaren generally, and I'm sure we'll speak more about this, maybe kicks on a little bit more. So ultimately, he's outperformed O'Ward. It's impressive. He's got that win over the line, should have 2 wins. Him and Pelot are absolutely in that different class on road courses. And I mean, Lundgaard's also delivering on street courses where you're not seeing O'Ward. But Yeah, just a few too many errant rounds as well in there to really mark a major step forward on last year. But it's still been a solid start to the season, and he is best of the rest. I think there is just that huge step down from really the three drivers that have been exceedingly good this year, but continues to really give O'Ward that run for his money. And I continue to be impressed by him. And I think if Aaron McLaren make the step forward that they really should have made this year and they should be making, then it allows him and O'Ward to show much better than both of them are.
And then number 3, as we've both agreed on prior to this, is obviously David Malukas.
Not for me.
Oh, not for you, really?
I've put Malukas in second. I've put Kirkwood third.
Okay,
no, it's a toss-up, but
well, okay, that's interesting. Well, I'll say why I put Kirkwood over Malukas then in that point, and you can argue the other way around. I just think for me, the consistency we've seen from Kirkwood has been ultra impressive. And that's not to say Malukas isn't, but it feels like, I mean, the first 5 rounds of the year, Kirkwood was in the top 5 for all of them. Arlington was very impressive, and I've also been really impressed about the step forward that Andretti and Kirkwood have continued to make a short over. His Gateway was competing for the victory. Phoenix was competing for victory. I appreciate he won Gateway last year, but I think we probably say that was quite fortuitous circumstances. And yes, maybe in Phoenix there was some fortuitous circumstances there. But finished 6th in Gateway, yes, maybe it wasn't what he achieved last year, but ultimately that's just continuing to prove he is becoming a pretty reliable short oval driver for good results. Only really one errant weekend this entire year, which was, I said weekend, 2 weeks, which was the Indy 500, where that did seem more of a package issue more than anything else, judging for the fact where Ericsson and Power were. But I mean, ultimately, there is some accountability to be taken there from Kirkwood. But ultimately, 3 podiums so far this year, a victory in Arlington, which I said was very impressive, 2 runner-up spots to Detroit as well. Possibly could have won that race should things have fallen into his way. And I've been impressed just by how he feels like he's maximizing every weekend. Like every weekend so far this year, apart from the Indy 500, I feel like he's got a result which there wasn't much more he could have done. Indy GP is obviously the next lowest and 9th. That one he was in 2nd before he got caught up by the yellow there, and suddenly a much better result there. His season looks even more impressive. So just the continued consistency from Kirkwood, and I just feel his bar at the minute is just marginally higher than Malukas's. I would say Malukas has exceeded expectation more than Kirkwood has, but if I'm comparing driver to driver, I think Kirkwood has been the better driver over the course of the first 9 races.
I think for me, my decision is purely contextual. Like if Kirkwood had made the move to Team Penske this off-season and delivering the season that he has done, I probably would put him ahead of Malukas. But I think the manner in which Malukas has obviously filled the legendary boots of Will Power, with a lot of people kind of questioning Penske's decision-making, doubting them, deciding to put a youngster in the car rather than extending Power's contract, he's really stepped up to the mark. And I've been very impressed by the fact he's constantly like not shirking the fact that this is a dream come true, but also he's kind of just relishing that pressure. And I think we expected from Malukas a lot of, not a lot of, that's probably being harsh, but judging by race days with Foyt last year, we were probably expecting some streakiness. Yet obviously after St. Pete and having the tyre failure, which was kind of induced by his error, but it was still unfortunate. It's just been such consistency. Obviously, Detroit was messy. I think that was the sort of weekend we maybe expected to see more of. But at the end of the day, that came in the week of the wake of the 500, and I think it can kind of be excusable. I know he said that he kind of processed everything that happened at Indy and what have you, but there's got to be some sort of hangover there. So yeah, I'm just really impressed by the fact that he's come into a massive team with 2 big names and not been at all phased. And generally speaking, I know Newgarden's got the 2 wins. Malukas has obviously come very close on 2 occasions, closer than anyone has not winning the race at the 500. He's just not been phased at all. And he has been top dog there, really, and found that consistency that we questioned whether he would find from the outset at Penske. And it's a toss-up, like either or could be 2nd or 3rd here, I would say. And again, like I've been very impressed by the manner in which Kirkwood has separated himself from, that chasing pack again that we've decided is headed by Lundgaard. And I think, I guess another reason why Malukas probably heads that group is just, obviously, I guess it's just putting into context where his teammates are, but he's never been in this position in the championship or close to it. And he's just looks at home, really, in the position that he is in. I think Kirkwood might be a little bit disappointed that he seems to have lost, and just Andretti generally lost that street course mantle to Palou, making another step forward there. But they have obviously made gains on short ovals, particularly road courses. I know the next few rounds will be pretty telling there. But yeah, it's very much same as last year for Kirkwood, which I guess is why it's probably done him down in my my rankings here, that this is what we expect from him now.
So would you say, if you remove the context of Malukas' move to Penske, you would say Kirkwood's had the better season so far, or?
Probably, but the context still exists. And, that's obviously shown in points, but I think the context is still a factor.
I mean, it ultimately depends how you interpret this question, because if you're looking
for sure.
flat, like I've gone for a more view of who has been the five best drivers of the season solely based on what they've done on track, whilst you've taken more of a background to it. So viewers, let us know what you think. Who is your second best driver of the season? It might be somebody else, and if it is, I would be very interested to hear your opinion on that. But is it Kirkwood and Malukas? But obviously, number one, it's only fair that we do touch on Alex Palou, and continuing the benchmark that he set over the last couple of seasons. And his points lead isn't as substantial as it was at this point 12 months ago, but he'd be pretty pleased with a 49-point gap to Kirkwood in second. And as we seem to always say, the bar has definitely been raised a little bit further. Like ultimately, there's going to be a natural crescendo where it's going to be impossible. But even when you think coming into the season, that's going to be pretty difficult for him to kind of raise that further. There has been improvements made. 4 victories to this point so far this season. He's obviously got 5 pole positions as well and 9 races. I mean, over half the races, including on every single track type. I mean, that's just an incredible run of form. And again, obviously about raising the bar, qualifying is one of those things. He's certainly done that. And street courses is the other element where it seems that his game has really been elevated as well too. So yes, his lead isn't substantial as it is last year, but he's not driving any worse. I mean, there's even been some results where maybe things haven't gone his way, like Gateway, for example, running out fuel in the pits, or the Indy GP where he was sent to the back after being caught out by the caution, even to the Indy 500 to some extent, being caught out strategy. And obviously Phoenix is the big outlier with that collision of VK, but that was kind of a 50-50 incident there where you can lie the blame on either side. But once again, super ultra impressive consistency from Palou, and he is just a step above the rest of the field. And it remains to be seen how anybody's going to really challenge him over the course of a season. Like I don't expect anyone to get close to him when we go into a lot of road courses in the second half of the season. It's going to be a huge challenges on racetracks that have been so successful at before. So yeah, I'm just so impressed with the way that he's been able to raise his game even further and make it look even more difficult for your opposition to close him down, despite him having 2 very low scores in just 9 races so far this year.
I think that's almost what makes this year so impressive, is the fact that he's had that DNF at Phoenix. He's had that essentially non-result at Gateway through these opening 9 rounds, and you can still have a 49-point buffer and seem in a pretty comfortable position in the championship with so many strong tracks to come. And I think the big question coming into this year was how close, if at all, he could come to replicating what he did last year. And ultimately, you're looking at the wins tally, and he's already halfway there. And yeah, I just feel generally the answer to that question has been resounding. And you're very right to make the point that he's almost excelled in more different ways again. Like he's come to Andretti's turf on these street courses and really deflated them. Like it really struck me after Detroit how almost deflated Kirkwood was by the fact that suddenly Palou is usurping them at the thing that used to be their thing, basically. And qualifying, you're also very right to mention that, because I mean, we've said it again and again on the pod, but he came into last year with 6 poles. He ended last year, I believe, with 12, and he's now raised that to 17. So in a year and a half, he's raised his pole tally by 11, which is incredible. So he's just continuing to set those new benchmarks. Like he is the guy in qualifying now. Like even after I think it was the Detroit pole, Power started kind of joking about the fact that Palou's almost on a better trajectory than he was en route to breaking the all-time poles record. So that's one to watch out for over the next decade or so. But yeah, obviously 2 fewer wins, but I don't think it's really been any less impressive for the most part, because continues to do things and dominate in a way that very few people have, and the 4-peat is looking very, very likely.
Okay, let's move on to our second category, which is the unsung hero. Now, I reckon I know you've got in mind, so I'm going to let you go first, Archie, because that's going to depend on who I say.
Yeah, so for me, it's Graham Rahal. I think after finishing in the top 10 in the championship every year from 2015 to 2021, it has obviously been a terrible few years for him, for the team. He's gone 11th to 15th to 18th to 19th in the championship. It's kind of plateaued in those lower teens, getting towards kind of just teetering the edge of being out of the top 20. And there's been points where, particularly when Lundgaard was there, he was being outshone by a pretty significant amount. And he even told local TV this week that he considered not renewing his contract. But things have turned a corner in 2026, and he's been on the podium 3 times in these opening 9 races. Yeah, I mean, he's last year 3 top 10 finishes, 5 already this year. He had 5 in 24 as well, but his best finish was 8th. So this is a level that I think people probably questioned whether Rahal really still had in him. I know we've obviously seen flashes of peaks in the last few years with his poles and his occasional podiums on the road courses that have really suited RLL, but this feels like a bit more of a renewal of kind of Graham of old, I would say. And he's only 3 points outside the top 10 points in 11th. And obviously without the Gateway crash, he would probably be at least 9th. So he's trending to kind of do something he's not done in half a decade. So yeah, just very impressed, because I think there were points where I don't know whether he even questioned it, maybe, pointing at the contract stuff he did, that it could be a bit of a lost cause. So I've been impressed just with how he's bounced back, because it's been not just 1 or 2 bad years, it's been several years now on this trajectory.
I've actually put Graham Rahal for a later category. You'll probably be able to work out which one it is. So I'll say Graham Rahal for this one. I think there's a lot of people who, it's a pretty tough one to pick from. I think there's pretty limited options. Like, I was looking at Marcus Ericsson, who has had a better year, but ultimately he's still 97 points of his teammate, which definitely can't call him unsung for that. Marcus Armstrong, but I feel like kind of coming into the season, we almost expected a little bit more, if anything. Like, we haven't quite seen maybe the consistent top 5 that we were hoping for. And then, do you go rogue, somebody like Dennis Hauger? But I don't think, again, we've seen enough from him so far. So I'm going to go for Rinus VeeKay, which is what I expected you to say, to be completely honest. Just because, yes, he only has 3 top 10 finishes this year, but I think we speak about maximising results, and he's genuinely doing that quite a lot of the time. So Gateway was obviously kind of his real highlight of the year so far, finishing a 4th, running up front for the majority of the race. Had a really good Indy 500 campaign, qualified for the Fast 12 and maybe wasn't expected to, and then ran pretty well to get a 6th place finish in the end there. Obviously, a lot of the top 10 of the season coming in St. Petersburg right at the start of the season. And yes, a lot of the other results are outside the top 10, but they're all between 12th and 15th. So I wouldn't say, like, if he's finishing 20th, okay, it's a massive concern. He's on the fringes of the top 10, and it's no secret Juncos probably have the weakest thrown street package of anybody in the entire series, as we've seen in the last couple of years. Like, ultimately, they struggle on that track type. And yes, maybe there is slightly more in the cards for VeeKay to put off, but he's there or thereabouts a lot of the time. And Phoenix has come the other outlier result. His crash happened pretty early on, but he looked pretty strong throughout the weekend and up until that point. Suddenly, if he ends up getting a top 5 at Phoenix, he's got another 20 points in the standings, and suddenly you're looking at him at 9th in the points, which is a very different outlook. I'm very hypothetical today, but I'm liking all these hypotheticals, trying to break it down a little bit more. So that's kind of why I've got Rinus VeeKay. I feel like he's maximising results like Kirkwood is, which I feel like is particularly valuable. And I feel like his stock is only continuing to increase ahead of next season, when we know there's going to be a lot of free seats available in the market. So that's why I've gone him, because ultimately, when you're looking at someone who's finishing between 12th and 15th every week, you're just thinking, well, that's not that impressive ultimately. That's kind of where you'd expect people to be. But on a package so weak, he's maximising those results for a lot of the time, and when he's got a good package behind him, he's delivering with good results. Yeah,
I had him down as my honourable mention for this category.
And then, the next category is the biggest surprise, which is where I had Graham Rahal. So I won't really add too much to what you've already spoken about, because my points are a lot of the same. But I think we were obviously expecting a step forward this year. We saw all these bigger leadership changes coming into the team with a lot of hope, and we have seen that really come to the fruition, the 3 podiums across the course of the year, which was completely unexpected. Like Indy GP, yes, you would expect a podium, but it's the fact that we're seeing this outside of the Indianapolis road course. In places like Alabama, for example, he was there on merit all day, which you never would have expected 12 months ago. I think Phoenix was a big confidence boost as well. The fact that he qualified 3rd and ended up finishing the top 10, like that short over package you never really would have seen last year, as proved by Gateway. Work still needs to be done, but ultimately the step forward is being made. And with the team making these development forward, he's also making that improvement forward. It's also the same for Louis Foster. Obviously, not quite to the same extent, but he's got his first 2 top 10s of the season and generally looks a lot more racy than he did at this point 12 months ago. So, yeah, a very impressive Graham Rahal at this point so far in the season. Ultimately, consistency is still maybe a bit of an issue compared to the Graham Rahal we saw 6 years ago. But ultimately, we're getting all these podiums and a lot more peaks, and you wouldn't have expected that coming into the season. So that's exactly why I've got Graham Rahal as my biggest surprise so far this year.
Yeah, so for my next one, maybe a little bit more out there, I guess the obvious one that people would pick as a surprise is Felix Rosenqvist winning the Indy 500, but it just didn't shock me that much. Like, that team has shown they can get the job done. Felix has been so quick at Indy, and just things have gone wrong in the past. So obviously need to mention that. Like, it's not even worth doing a moment of the season so far, because that's so clearly it. But it wasn't necessarily like a major surprise to me. Obviously, it was a very cool story, like a quote unquote smaller team. They're not one of the big powerhouses winning it, but collectively a real force at that track. So my surprise is it probably is still out there, but it's just Scott McLaughlin's season. This was supposed to be a bit of a rebound season, and I don't think it's been like a poor season. It's certainly not been enough for him to kind of fall into the category of, being a disappointment. He's 7th in points. It's been okay, but we hold him in really high esteem. Like, I predicted him to finish 2nd in the championship, and I just feel like we expect more than okay from McLaughlin. I'm pretty surprised we haven't really seen, aside from maybe odd flashes, which are few and far between, anything close to really that restoration of his form from 2024, off the back of which we were kind of saying, if he hadn't had the St. Pete disqualification, he would have been right there with Palou in the championship battle. And again, he's kind of just not really that close. And, let's use the short ovals as a case study, for instance. It really looked like at the end of 24, he cracked that. Yet he's not really factored for the win in either of these short oval races. I've kind of felt like he's trailed his teammates a little bit, and kind of, he just hasn't really been a factor anywhere, particularly. Obviously, St. Pete, he was kind of, but Palou ran away with that race. And, the 500, he finishes 3rd. It was an epic finish, and he was rightfully delighted with it. But he entered kind of through the back door. It didn't really feel like he had the car beneath him to deliver more than that. So they're kind of the two. And other than that, I feel like we've seen pretty little. He's tended to be mid-lower top 10 on his better days. And if not finishing outside the top 10, we've still seen some errors, some scruffier moments, which it felt like in 24 he pretty much eradicated after those first few years, having made the move over. So I think the way I would put it is I expected more of a step forward, both from him and also from just the general Penske package. Like, it doesn't seem like it's just quite as much of a force, at least on his side, as it has been. Something's maybe not quite meshing, and I do hope to see a step forward, because we know he's got it in him, and IndyCar's better off for having someone like McLaughlin in that fight at the front. But he's kind of just in no man's land, I feel, at the moment, where he's not had a bad season by any stretch, but it's still not been spectacular, which is kind of the standard we came to expect from him.
Yeah, I like that point. I think, as you say, too many errors, I still think, from McLaughlin. You look at Arlington, qualifying, Barber practice, stuff like that. It's a lot like last year, where errors were having such huge consequences, but were so untimely errors that they were costing him hugely in points. But let's go on to our disappointments so far of the year. And there's no way of really sugarcoating this. I'm going to go the standard of racing on road and street courses so far this season. Like, ultimately, I still think the racing on ovals has proved a gateway in Phoenix, and the Indy 500 has been superb. But I just think the standard of racing on road and street courses left a little bit to be desired in kind of the first half of the season. Like, races like Long Beach come to mind, for example. Like, you couldn't really tell me much that happened in Long Beach. It was pretty processional, and that's been an issue of a lot of races this year. St. Pete was pretty processional. Same for Barber. Arlington was a fun race, but it took a long time to get going in that race. The GP was a little bit wild, but that's because everybody crashed into each other, as was the case at Detroit. And obviously, there's been a lot spoken about the hybrid, and that's part of the repercussions the added weight. And obviously, let's hope when we get 2028 with a new car that weight reduction is going to really help improve the racing. I just haven't really got sense to me how the racing's improved so drastically on ovals for whatever reason, or it feels like it has. But it's just gone so backward and run street courses. And I'm not blaming Palou for this, but ultimately, there's obviously a suggestion that the added weight is really suited his driving style, but maybe not to the same extent as others got. And there's become a lot of people are very outspoken about the hybrid. Like pretty much every driver in the field at this point isn't really ashamed to just say how much they dislike it at this point, which is very telling, I think, of what they think of the package. And when you're trying to sell a product where the same guy's winning every week, as I said, I don't blame Palou. That's absolutely his job. He's doing a phenomenal job. But the same guy's winning every week. And a lot of the road street races aren't very good, apart from the ones where everybody crashes into each other. I just don't think it's a good look when you're trying to sell the diversity of your series.
It is funny, Palou, it was raised to Palou because I think Dixon at Gateway had made a remark about the fact that 100% of the drivers would not want the hybrid, they'd all be happy to get rid of it. And that was posed to Palou, who he basically admitted that clearly it's something that's helped him. And it's clearly not the sole thing because he was also performing extremely well before then. But it's certainly not been a hindrance, and it seems to have separated him even further because his driving style is just so immaculate that it really just suits this heavier car. But I think they're all very good points. Like, I think it has been pretty disappointing. Like, there is just such a chasm between, short oval racing. I know Gateway maybe wasn't quite what it was last year. They made the tweaks to the package that weren't phenomenal as such, but still pretty good. Phoenix obviously excellent. The 500 was the 500, but there is a big gulf there for sure. But anyway, I have gone more with kind of a driver team-led angle. Like, I guess I'll throw out a couple of honourable mentions.
You love an honourable mention.
That's the theme of all these ones. I think obviously the obvious one would be willpower. I think when you're looking purely at results, I think there's been things that have been his doing. I think there was obviously he had a lot of crashes early on. There were issues getting up to kind of speed with the brakes, and he was making mistakes himself. The GP was a pretty glaring one. Obviously he was kind of got himself into contention for the win there, and overshoots it on pit exit and ruins his day. There've also been areas of misfortune, areas of poor execution, which is not unfamiliar from the 26 crew, I must say. There's been just things that are, for all parties, unlucky. So he obviously finds himself down in, I've not got the standings to hand, I think he's 17th in points. He is 17th in points. That's pretty insane to think about. Like, it couldn't have gone much worse. But, ultimately for power, like, he has at least shown a lot of it's a bit like the Dixon argument. Actually, Dixon's my other honourable mention. I think he's had more bad luck. Obviously, he's not made the errors that Power has made, but they're both in a very similar boat. Dixon obviously 12th in points. I think the reason I was surprised you put Dixon 5th is just because there's still such a gap to Palou, and I feel like that's only increasing.
Yeah, I see that. Like, I've tried to go a bit rogue so we could go a little bit.
We like it.
Episode, but I see the point. Like, ultimately, there is 2 points of this where yes, Dixon's still a long way off Palou, and he is. But I feel like the results really aren't showing. Actually, he's had quite a decent season, and should have things gone slightly differently, he'd suddenly be on 3 podiums and go, actually, that's not that bad of a season.
Yeah, and I think I would kind of make the same argument for Power though, which is another thing that kind of.
I think for me,
Dixon point.
Yeah, I think for me, at least from the Power perspective, there's been too many errors which have been his fault. Yeah.
Oh, I completely. We've not had that from Dixon. I also think Power has actually been more competitive than Dixon. Power's led laps in 3, 4, 5 races, and he probably could have a couple of wins and could have a few podiums. So, yeah, go on, Dan.
Dixon has led the same amount of races as Power has this year.
I get the impression that maybe Dixon's were in a slightly more wild way.
Strategy.
Yes. But anyway, this is a really long-winded way of saying that my disappointment, underwhelming driver, team, whatever you want to put it for the season, much because of the high bar, I would say, than anything, has been Pato O'Ward and Aaron McLaren. And I'm not saying, and the reason I mention the team is because I'm not saying that this is all or even predominantly O'Ward's fault. I don't really think it's his fault at all. I pin this more, for some reason, the team have gone from their best season yet, a year of such hope, to being in a sense of like semi-turmoil again. And maybe saying turmoil isn't fair, but we had O'Ward before Gateway talking about transformation again. And that just confused me a bit. Like, I thought this team had stabilized and they were past the point of it feeling like they were in transition. And it's like, are we just in a permanent state of some sort of flux? Like, you don't hear about this at Ganassi when they're doing exceedingly well. Obviously, Penske have kind of suffered from a bit of the same with turnover in the last year or so. But it just bemused me a bit that O'Ward was speaking about taking a step back to go forward when they seem to be on such a forwards trajectory. And ultimately this year, it just looks like that ceiling has been lowered because, okay, Lundgaard has a win. He could have 2 wins. He's outperformed O'Ward on road courses. And he has, 3 podiums to O'Ward's none. But O'Ward has been consistent. He's had, obviously those 6 top 5s without having a podium. And to me, that does suggest he's doing a pretty solid job and he is kind of maximizing what's at his disposal. But somehow, somewhere, he's just being restricted from the peaks that we know he has. Like Gateway was the perfect epitome without having, obviously that top 5 finish to show for it. We've kind of returned to this situation of there just being a little bit of kind of confusion over just underperforming. And for what reason? Like, I feel like they don't always know. So to have no podiums from 9 races after having 4 podiums from the first 8 races last season is a pretty big shock. And, okay, he still finds himself 15 points, which is credit to this consistency that he has found, which is not something that we necessarily saw a few years ago when it felt like he'd have this just run of real streakiness every year. I just think it's a bit of a regression. It has been a bit of a regression in a year where, okay, you're not going into the year saying O'Ward's going to fight for the championship, but you're expecting to be the closest contender again and much closer to Palou. Whereas we're halfway through and he just looks to be cutting a bit of a frustrated figure. And I just don't know really where we're at with him and Aaron McLaren after such a positive season in 2025.
Cool. Let's go on to our race of the year so far. I would take a guess we have the same one. Do you have Phoenix, Archie?
I do indeed. Do you want me to give my reasoning?
You may. Let's crack on.
I mean, obviously we are discluding the 500 here because that's just how we do it. Because
it's always going to be the best race. So
yes, and this year stands truer than ever. I think the GP is arguably the most fun race just because it was kind of that. I don't mind like once or twice a year just having a race that is complete and utter mayhem for whatever reason. Everyone forgets to drive. Like as long as it's not happening every weekend, like it can be a little bit entertaining, and it was quite entertaining. And then, but the race actually ended up being all right because of all the mix-up. But I think Phoenix was just the perfect marker of how much IndyCar's short oval racing has come on in recent years because it was unpredictable to the finish. We had fights for the lead for most of the race. And I think it was a race that really showcased driver skill as well. Like side-by-side racing was enabled by a package that drivers could really lean on, whether the car, the tires. And I just thought it was just a tremendous race. I don't think there's much more you can say than like it was just the perfect exemplification of everything that's right about IndyCar racing when it's at its best. It was raw, it was aggressive, and I think in this case it represented more as well, obviously given it was this NASCAR collaboration weekend, and it was just refreshing, I think, to see the championships both working together and helping to attract both new eyeballs to both series, essentially. And I think it offered a blueprint of the sort of quite basic small win type of innovation that can just really work. And I just think it was a great decision to return there and return in this particular way as well.
I think what I really liked about Phoenix is we had so many teams in contention for victory: Penske, McLaren, Andretti, Ed Carpenter Racing. Throughout the race, there's a different storyline going on. There's a different person able to use the Highland. There's a different person able to make the bar moves when they needed to. And up and down the field, you would have so many stories going on. And there was your frenetic short oval race where actually the balance was really good between it being, you had to be brave with your overtakes. But on the flip side of it, it wasn't too easy either, where the racing's so easy to pass, it becomes a little bit boring. So the balance there was spot on. And we've seen over the last couple of years, IndyCars are kind of really excelling at new short ovals, a place where you don't really expect them to excel. Nashville is another great one, for example. That was kind of an unexpected arrival onto the calendar, and it's proved to become a fan favourite very quickly. Same as Milwaukee to the same extent. So these new short ovals IndyCar entries into the calendar have had a really positive impact, and Phoenix was just continuing that trend. And we had Rahal Lanigan cars qualifying in third and fourth after all their short oval troubles, which we easily forget about. We had what we thought could be a championship turning moment with VK and Palou in the wall early on. And it was just kind of a really feel-good race. And when you're trying to sell your product like you are to a lot of NASCAR fans there that weekend, they did a superb job. And that's just reaffirms the general desire that we need more overs in the calendar. Yes, it's going to be hopefully mile and a half more in the future, but I think it just came back with a good bang and a very positive impact into the series. Let's go on to the funniest moments so far this year. Kind of the last point reflecting on the year so far. You probably have a whole list, or do you? Yeah,
I've got a top three. I'll present to you my top three. So
okay.
At number three, for me, and there's probably stuff I've forgotten, to be fair.
There's a lot of stuff I've forgotten.
But I guess the most memorable things we remember, I think number three was Joseph Newgarden singing happy birthday to veteran journalist Bruce Martin and saying he hopes he gets all the barbecue or something. So that was pretty funny. That was quite early in the season. That might actually have been Phoenix or Arlington, that kind of early region of races, I'm pretty sure. Number two was the press conference we had with Will Power, where he was late because his car had run out of fuel and we're being shown all of the pictures, and he gave a whole elaborate story of how he ran short on gas about 50 meters from the gas station, had to run in and get a canister so he could make his way there. So that was amusing. But number one is, for me, absolutely resounding, was Dennis Hauger posting on his Instagram story a picture of himself with a rocket launcher. As you do.
I have the same. It's just like Dennis Hauger is such an unassuming person. He seems to spend all his Instagram life with pictures of him on a bike or in the gym, and you scroll one, he's got a rocket launcher in his hand, which is just so out of context. Like someone needs to make an out of context IndyCar page, and the profile image has to be Dennis Hauger holding a rocket launcher. It's brilliant content. I would also say it's probably not one of the funnest moments of the year, but there was a video of Newgarden and Power speaking about the World Cup and how Rasmussen's really aggressive because Denmark's not in it. And Power is just so funny. I mean, he can't say Rasmussen's name either. Like he was like Rasmussen or something. He can't say Collette's name either.
Yeah,
what does he call him?
He's like Kai Calais or something. Chow Calais or something. This is on an interesting YouTube video.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Will Power never quite has any idea of what is actually going on. And that was another really funny example. And he was saying that, it was jokingly saying that Rasmussen came up to me after Phoenix and apologised because he was so upset that Denmark weren't in the World Cup. That's why he was racing like such a madman. It's a very funny video. You have to go and find it. But
talking of Rasmussen, there was a video on IndyCar socials of like what drivers, what people love but drivers don't get. Rasmussen just said cricket. Is cricket even a thing in Denmark? Like, I feel like it's not, well, obviously not a prolific cricketing nation. So that was quite amusing. I think the other one from the year that was quite funny was obviously the push to pass gate. And I think it was pre-GP when it was all kicking off between Palou and O'Ward. That was all quite funny. It seems like somehow every press conference Alex Palou is in, as understated as he is, ends up being really quite amusing. There was the one where Julian Robertson turned up and Palou was basically like censoring him, making sure he didn't say anything he was giving anything away. So that was quite funny. But
the Power Rasmussen debrief after Phoenix and the urinals is one I also found really funny. How he mentioned that. How he mentioned how they just ran each other. The first one they ran to each other after the incident was in the toilets. They just decided to discuss their race whilst going for a WAS, which I just find very, very amusing. Will Power is just, even the story, do you remember the story earlier in the year about his dad, how he fought with a gunman? Like, one, what a hero his dad was, and two, his dad is exactly like him. He looks the same, he's got the same sense of humour, and he's just like this, he's just like wrestle the gunman to the ground. And in true willpower fashion, he's just so chill about it. It's like another normal day in the office of Willpower's dad. Just wild. Let's do a bit more previewing into the rest of the year, though. One of our favourite segments is always trying to predict what race winners we're going to have the rest of the year. And I feel like we always go way too optimistic for this segment. So we'll see if we have the same for the last 9 races of the year. Goes without saying, really. I take it you got Alex Palou to win at least one other race this year.
Yeah, so I've got Palou, but before we go listing them, how many more do you have?
6. Well, 6 including Palou, so I got 5 more
Okay.
to say.
I've got 6 including Palou. I'm intrigued whether we might have the same 6 here.
I don't think we will.
Okay, so I'll throw out another name.
Well, I'm gonna say Palou is probably going to win. How many more do you think? I think he's going to win probably 4, and then the rest will have 1 each. Would be my guess.
Yes, I think I did try and work this out. I think Palou wins 3 or 4.
Cool.
So right, okay, another name, Newgarden.
Yep. He's got to win a Nashville and Milwaukee. He will win one of the over races for sure. And my same argument would be for David Malukas. He will win one of the over races, in my opinion.
Sure. Christian Rasmussen too.
Did you put Malukas, sorry, or?
Yes, I did.
Fine. I didn't go for Rasmussen.
Okay, interesting.
I think my prediction was Palou will win a Milwaukee, Newgarden will win Milwaukee, and Malukas will win Nashville.
Okay, I think I had Palou not winning an oval. I had Newgarden, Malukas, Rasmussen. Although Malukas could easily just upset the odds and not win an oval race and just win another random race.
No, I haven't actually, but I will go for his countryman, Christian Lundgaard. I can see him taking a Portland or a Markham or
I probably
somewhere like that.
I probably have overlooked Lundgaard, to be fair. But
I don't blame you. Like, he was one of my fringe ones. That.
Okay, final 2. Have you gone for Kirkwood and Power?
No.
Okay, interesting. I guess you've gone for Kirkwood and Dixon.
Gone for Kirkwood and Dixon.
Okay.
Dixon's winning streak, like, you feel at one point this year, the stars will align for him to just walk into one. Like, it takes one of those crazy races. Like a DC, for example, could be wild, could be a Markham, could be a bit unpredictable.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think I've probably overlooked Lundgaard and Dixon. It's just there are so few races left, and Palou's so good everywhere.
That's the problem. It's like Palou will win multiple races, and that's just kind of eliminating people. Like, neither of us have predicted Pato O'Ward to win a race this year, which is pretty wild. Neither of us have predicted Scott McLaughlin to win a race this year. That is pretty wild. And then you're looking at people like, well, Maya Shank could well win a race at some point this season. Like, Marcus Ericsson possibly could be an outside shot of a victory. So, yeah, you're right. It's difficult because Palou's going to win so many races, and you just we've come to learn that you can't predict loads and loads of people because Palou will win more races than you expect.
Maybe he doesn't win any.
Imagine that'd be the turn of the tide. Yeah, Palou doesn't win the championship, and our mid-season review looks a bit embarrassing after that. Dixon needs a good second half of the year to make this look good.
Yeah. Anyway, bold prediction: Palou doesn't win any races.
That is certainly not my bold prediction.
Go on. Do you want to go or shall I go?
You should go because I haven't actually finished mine yet.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how much I actually believe this, but I just thought I'd throw it out there anyway. Every rookie is going to finish on the podium before the end of the season.
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's insane. But Colette, we've seen encouraging signs on ovals. I would fancy maybe an outside shot if he came pretty close at Gateway. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility. Hauger, I've written down a strategic gamble paying off somewhere. So as you can tell, this is pretty loose. But I've been impressed enough with Hauger's kind of pace and his racecraft at points, and obviously I guess it peaked so far at St. Pete. Such an encouraging start qualifying so well, but could replicate that. VK was on the podium in Toronto, so maybe on the street races. Mick Schumacher, I have written, it might take a well-timed caution. Portland is good for RLL. So make of that what you will. I'll look like a genius if it's right. If it's not right, I mean, I know I'm insane anyway, so it's just a stab in the dark.
I'm struggling a little bit this one because I'm tempted to do a driver market one, but I don't know where. Like, I could in Newgarden leads Penske, but it feels like a bit unrealistic. Not that that's the purpose of this prediction, but
I had a secondary idea, but I decided it just wouldn't possibly happen. That O'Ward was not going to finish on the podium at all.
I was vaguely thinking that, but if you've also said counteracted that point by saying all 3 rookies are going to get a podium,
yeah,
and they have 2 top 10s between them in 9 races.
It's going to happen.
I will go for Marcus Ericsson will finish top 5 in the points,
and he's not going to win a race. So what is he? Is he just going to have just finish on the podium every race?
Well, I think he's going to get a lot of top 4s and top 5s, 4th and 5th place finishes, and I think he'll get a couple of podiums. Like, there is still, I think Andretti will do well at Markham and DC because they're street courses. There are a couple of tracks coming up where I feel like Ericsson just seems like the type of guy to have a randomly good Portland weekend out of nowhere, and he has gone pretty well at Milwaukee in recent years, even if the results don't show that.
So, how much do you actually believe this, or how much is it every rookie's going to finish on the podium?
I think mine's more realistic than yours.
Oh, it's more realistic. Do you believe it's going to happen or not?
No, not really.
This is good.
Well, I think Ericsson has generally had a better year. But he's only like 50 points off 5th. He's less than 50 points off 5th. And like Newgarden and McLaughlin, 2 inconsistent on Roan Street. Rosenqvist is basically being carried by his Indy 500 results in the points. Armstrong's just seems to finish between 6th and 10th or 5th and 10th every week. And then O'Ward, I'm just not sure on McLaren's package. And I feel like Andretti's package has actually been pretty good at a lot of races, just their execution has been pretty bad. So that's why I've gone to Marcus Ericsson. I'm not sure I believe it, but time will tell. Time will tell. Yeah, I think I might be on a bit of a gateway high from Ericsson. I might have bid too much in Ericsson's stocks after a randomly good short over performance.
Well, that's actually a nice segue onto driver to watch, because I'm pretty high on Joseph Newgarden at the moment. I think if you are looking kind of what you've spoken about with Ericsson there, I think if you're looking at someone who can be a bit of a disruptor to that top order of the championship, maybe looking, obviously he's not, I mean, it would take a lot for him to win the championship, but you're looking at someone who can maybe have an outside bet at finishing in the top 3. I think Newgarden is probably my driver to watch for the rest of the season. Just to lay clear, that is our next category. I did a very unclear segue there, but it just felt natural. It's just been a miserable few years for Newgarden, obviously. I feel like last 2 years in particular, he's set plenty of kind of new low bars for his time at Penske. And, now we're looking at the fact that he's 1 point from 5th and only 6 points from 4th in the standings at the halfway point. And there's still 3 more oval races for him to kind of really cash in on. And okay, I've gone out and said in that previous bit that Malukas might win one, Rasmussen might win one, but I can still very clearly see a route here where Newgarden ends this season on 5 wins again. And, I think the one thing that I would almost say is the greatest thing to watch with Newgarden is that road and street form, because it does feel like more so than the last couple of years, there's a little bit of momentum behind him now. And he's unfortunately for several years been plagued really kind of in the aero screen era by a lot of inconsistency, but there's just a bit of a sense of I feel like revitalization this year. Obviously, as I said earlier, looks happier, looks more confident. And if he can find that upturn away from ovals, I do fancy him factoring in that fight for certainly top 4, maybe top 3 if Malukas drops off, for instance, or something happens with Kirkwood like the back end of last season. And if he manages to do so, it would be his best season, as I also think I said earlier, since 22. So getting on for kind of half a decade now. So yeah, just pretty high on Newgarden at the moment. I think he's in a pretty good place. So he's my one to watch.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who put it. Ericsson is one, Power is one, McLaughlin is certainly one, O'Ward is one. I'm surprised you haven't said him at all this episode already, but I'm going to go back to Rinus VeeKay for this one, because you look at the driving market for 2027 and there's a lot of big seats available. We know we'll have an Andretti seat, potentially if Ericsson goes. We know we'll have a McLaren seat. In all likelihood, we don't think Nolan Siegel's going to stay. There is a Ganassi seat on paper. There might be 2 Ganassi seats on paper. Realistically, that probably will be filled by Dixon and Simpson, but again, you never know. And we know there will be a Team Penske seat on paper as is the case with Newgarden, whose contract situation remains to be seen. That's an interesting point, actually, because usually Penske make this whole thing of liking to get contracts done early, but they haven't done with Newgarden this year. So
they didn't with Power either.
We didn't with Power either. So that's something else to watch, which is maybe interesting. They haven't got around to it so far. But the reason why I say VK is for years and years and years and years, he's been, okay, he's probably next in line for a top seat, but it's never happened. He's had to go to, I mean, he got that Charles of Coin last year, really proved himself once again and kind of really reaffirmed that he's actually one of the drivers who's maybe outperforming the machinery they're in. Proved that a Coin and is doing a pretty solid job at Hincross, as we said earlier. But it feels like this second half of the season is going to be so important for him to really prove to the top teams that he is a guy that they can invest in. And the first half of the year, I feel like he's shown enough, but he needs to continue that form in the second half of the year, I think. Like, ultimately, if his form dips off, will the top teams be ever so slightly concerned? Well, maybe, because we've seen McLaren, they took a risk on Seagull that hasn't quite paid out, for example, and they wouldn't want to risk that again. And that's, for me, where his biggest potential landing zone is going to be at Aaron McLaren. So, for me, VK is one to watch with his performances race and race to see if he's going to do enough to prove to the top teams that he's a driver worth investing in and a driver that they believe can win races and get podiums if they sign them for their team in future seasons. And he's obviously got a 1-year deal with Hincross, so his contract is out at the end of the year, so he has an opportunity to move teams with any seats available. So I think really important second half of the year for his own future, and you never know where he could end up and then what his future career could look like. So for the sake of finally getting that top ride, the second half of the season is so important, because this is the best opportunity he's ever going to have at falling into a big seat for the following season.
After all this time, have I converted you into a VK guy?
Ask me in 3 months' time.
Okay, fair enough.
More so than I had been before. I'm not quite your levels. I feel like I don't really have a driver who maybe it's Dixon now. I was about to say who's on your VK path.
That really underground, under.
I hope people can see where I'm coming from. Maybe I probably should have put Newgarden in retrospect now, because you do make a good point. He has got 2 wins and Dixon does have 1 podium, but I just think Dixon's been a bit unlucky and just driven pretty well.
I respect your rationale. Like, it's not unreasonable.
One thing we're going to do new for this one is we're just going to tell you what to keep an eye on for in every driver, just kind of expanding our point. We'll just do one sentence driver to driver and just tell you why the second half of the year could be important and what to look out for. So we're going to do it team by team. So start off with AJ Foyt Racing. I'll start off with Kyle Collette. Obviously, has shown flashes so far in his rookie season, but ultimately just needs to really kick on second half of the season. Maybe not going to podium, but a couple of top 10s on the board I think would be really good. I think Foyt's been pretty happy with what he's shown so far. So just getting more concrete results on the board. He still was an outside shot of rookie of the year, so pushing for that would be a big accomplishment as well.
And his teammate Santino Ferrucci, I feel like he just kind of needs to become the talking points at that team again, because I think in the early part of the season he's been eclipsed a little bit by Collette, even if not necessarily results-wise. But he's very far off the form that we saw in 2024 when he was in the top 10, 11 times. He's got 2 8th-place finishes, and that's all he's got to show for this season so far. So Ferrucci needs to kind of bring himself back into the consciousness again.
And on Will Power side, he needs results. He's shown good pace throughout the season, but execution and has been a real problem for Andretti. So it's about getting those results on the board and definitely kind of recovering from that 17 points and trying to aim for a comfortable top 10 finish in the championship.
Yeah, and then obviously going on to Kirkwood, who's one of the main players at the top of the championship. I think obviously the thing to watch is how close he can actually get to challenging below, because, I mean, last season, back end, he dropped off a little bit. Inconsistency started to creep in. So I think the road course races coming up will be telling. 2 more street courses as well for them to regain their superiority, and 2 more short ovals for them to, or 3 more short oval races for them to continue to make that impression too.
On Marcus Ericsson's side, it's absolutely proving to Andretti Global that they should put his faith in him for another season. Obviously, Dennis Hauger is very hotly tipped for that seat in the future, but Ericsson has shown respectably so far in this year, but he really needs to kick on like the form we saw in Gateway, and maybe the expectation that I have him top 5 in points. And just need to prove why they should put their faith in him over Dennis Hauger for 2027.
And on to Aaron McLaren. I mean, we've kind of spoken about them a lot this episode, but Pato O'Ward in particular, I think the big question mark here is just whether those top 5s, as in 4th and 5th place finishes, can become podiums and wins again, because it does feel like he's starting to become a bit frustrated, and needs to kind of alleviate that in this back half of the season.
Nola Siegel was obviously a pretty difficult one. It looks like his time at McLaren will be coming to an end at the end of the season. So for him, it's about proving to other teams that he is somebody who can still put your investment in, put your trust in, and getting a couple of top 10s to round out the season to hopefully get in a good spot ahead of the driving market for 2027.
And to round off our McLaren, Christian Lundgaard, it's a pretty simple one for him. He's currently 7 points ahead of Pato O'Ward. So he is looking in this back half of the season to become the first teammate to ever beat O'Ward in the championship.
Somebody you haven't mentioned so far this episode is Kiffin Simpson. It's been a pretty quiet year for him so far. We saw a lot of peaks last year, like we saw the top 5 at Detroit and podium at Toronto. So it's in those kind of similar results, as well as kind of reaching the top 10 on a more consistent basis, like we see with his teammates.
Scott Dixon now, the talk of this episode. I mean, I think kind of two-pronged for him. He's obviously looking to extend that 21-year winning run to 22 seasons. But alongside that, it's purely the same question of can he close what is quite a mysterious gap to Palou any further?
For Alex Palou, it's all about getting the job done to claim a 5th series championship, but seeing how far can he push the boundaries once again? Can he continue his very impressive qualifying form? How many races can he win? And can he continue to set the benchmark that nobody else can get close to?
Dale Coyne racing now, and Romain Grosjean, someone else who we haven't really mentioned this episode. He's had a quiet year, a solid one at that, but I'd be interested to see as this year kind of unfolds whether IndyCar is indeed still a play for him for many years to come, and whether he can really earn that with kind of stepping up to what we saw from VK with that team last year.
Dennis Hauger is the complete opposite to Marcus Ericsson. He needs to prove why he should take Marcus Ericsson's seat for 2027. That's going to really help by winning the Rookie of the Year, which is in prime position for. And trying to get more top 10s throughout the rest of the season, particularly on ovals, would be a very good showing for him. So that's a big target there for Dennis Hauger if he wants to step up in 2027.
Ed Carpenter Racing, and first off, Alexander Rossi, once he is fully recovered from the injury sustained in his practice crash at the Indy 500. I really think him in particular with ECR, but I'm sure you'll come on to very similar with Christian Rasmussen, need to now really start delivering on their road and street course kind of promise or what we have been promised from that package. He's currently got 2 9th place finishes, Rossi, on road and street courses so far this year. So need to see a little bit more from the driver who is supposedly spearheading that team as the veteran.
And for Rasmussen, as you say, it's absolutely about showing that form on road street courses. We know he can do it on ovals. He has his future secured at the team. It's about showing to everybody that he's not just an oval guy and that he can do it on every track type and start getting more of those top 10 results on road street courses.
And on to Juncos Hollinger Racing, and for Rinus VK, it is also very simple. How much of a player can he prove to be in what is promising to be a pretty volatile silly season driver market? And he's got to continue to put himself at the forefront of that shop window.
And for Stingray Rob, it's obviously unlikely that he's going to be returning back to Juncos Hollinger Racing next year. However, he is still within a chance of achieving leader circle. That should be something that he can realistically aim for. A few top 10 finishes across the rest of the season would certainly help his cause. He hasn't had any so far this season, unlike the last 2 seasons. So leader circle would be a good accomplishment for Stingray Rob.
Maya Shank Racing next up, and Felix Rosenfish, Rookie 500 winner, is obviously riding a bit of a wave, some momentum. Gateway was a little bit disappointing, but purely for him, it's about getting a new deal over the line, which I'm sure is a bit of a formality now after his success in May.
Marcus Armstrong is really building on the preseason expectations that he had of regular top 5s and regular podiums. It feels like maybe the consistency that we saw last year has taken a slight dip so far this season. So it's about kind of getting to that form where he was earning top 5, top 10 finishes week in, week out, and just kind of improving a little bit on what he did last year, earning those more podiums, and potentially a first race victory at some point this season.
And on to Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing now. And Graham Rahal is still in search of his first victory since 2017. And after 4 seasons outside the top 10 in points as well, that is his big goal too for the rest of the season.
Louis Foster's got his first 2 top 10 finishes this season, but he needs to continue. He can do that more often. Obviously, there were 2 tracks that seemed to quite favour Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, so he needs to prove he can do this on a more consistent basis across the course of the rest of the year, and particularly show his form on the ovals as well.
For Mick Schumacher, it has been a testing rookie year so far. He got injured at the very start in his St. Pete crash and has been carrying that wrist injury and will be carrying that wrist injury until he has surgery post-season. But I think he really just has to target a headline result. He's not really been in the headlines for anything results-wise since his fourth place qualifying result in Phoenix. So that's one to watch. And if my prediction's true, he's going to be on the podium. I'm not sure I believe it, but we'll see.
And rounding out of Team Penske for Scott McLaughlin, it's all about finding victory lane once again. He's on a very long drought since his last. He's in a very long drought since his last victory in Milwaukee 2024. It's been a bit of a weird season so far. Maybe the championship position won't mean too much, but I think for his own confidence, returning to victory lane would be very, very important.
Joseph Newgarden has obviously shown his overall prowess so far this season and may continue to do so in this back half as he pushes for his best championship finish in several seasons. But ultimately, as we've mentioned throughout this episode, he needs to build more consistency on road and street courses if he is to return to at least the top 5 in the standings.
And ending off with David Malukas is just continuing what he's done so far this season and really impressing his maiden season of Team Penske, but aim for the highs of his first race victory in IndyCar, which should have come in the first 9 races, but he's got a prime opportunity there in the second 9 races of 2026. And just before we look forward to Road America, we just need to touch on the unfortunate news this week that Brian Reinbold team owner Dennis Reinbold unfortunately passed away this week at the age of 65, obviously leading the Brian Reinbold team since it was formed in 1999. Has obviously been a great impact on both his own team, on IndyCar, and the wider state of Indiana as well. And it's obviously only fair that we just briefly reflect on the work that Dennis Reinbold had done in IndyCar. And it's obviously very sad news for a team still active in IndyCar and an individual who had a great impact on his team and had such a desire and support of the Indianapolis 500, and a person who seemed to give so many opportunities up and down the field to drivers and team personnel who maybe wouldn't have got that opportunity otherwise. And he's obviously done such a great job with his team over the years for him to be so competitive in Indy 500. Every single car he entered into that race, the team were able to qualify with, despite all the bumping we've seen in years gone. So very unfortunate news this week of the passing of the Brian Reinbold team owner Dennis Reinbold, and we obviously send the very best to his friends and family in this difficult time.
Yeah, he has been a tremendous servant to this paddock. Obviously, built the team in its foundations as a full-time operation and later became a really integral part of the Indy 500. And everything that Brian Reinbold Racing represents and everything that Dennis Reinbold represented really align and epitomize, I would say, the values of the Indy 500 as a race. They really embraced it. And he represented the sport with such a passion. And as you very rightly mentioned, Dan, he opened doors for a lot of people, whether that is giving drivers opportunities that obviously are not full-time in the sport, but many others across the sport as well, really helping their introduction into the IndyCar world. And I think all of the tributes from around the IndyCar world and even wider really speak volumes to just, how much he will be missed, but also the impact that he had. And this was a team with very big ambitions to return to full-time IndyCar competition. And I think we can now only hope that they continue that bid and do so in his honor and really finish off what he has so greatly started.
I mean, the team have already said on all their posts paying tribute to Dennis that we can think of no better way to honour Dennis than to chase a victory in the 111th running of the Indianapolis 500. So it's obviously great to see that already, that his legacy will live on within that team and they will continue to do what he sought to do in all his years of running that team and winning Indianapolis 500 in his memory. So obviously very, very sad news this week. So that's it for our mid-season review. We'll be back next week to review IndyCar at Road America. As we said, this is where it starts getting a little bit quieter when the World Cup's on. So we've got Road America and then a 2-week break before Mid-Ohio. Then it's a 2-week break before Nashville and a 3-week break before Portland. So it gets a little bit slower before it really kind of picks up in the 6 races to end off the season in just 5 weeks. And obviously, this is Palou's happy hunting ground, so we'll see if he can continue his imperious form there. But as we said last week, we've had a couple of surprise pole sitters in the last couple of years. Give me a rogue shout for a rogue pole sitter this week, Archie.
Well, I mean, we predicted our fast sixes last week.
I know, but just for fun, let's continue the legacy of Road America having a rogue pole sitter.
Is Foster rogue again, if I am going with someone within my fast six?
Yeah, sure.
Well, no, let's go.
Rogue.
Yeah, it's rogue. Let's go more fun than that. I think Dennis Hauger, this is where he gets his podium.
Ooh, I am between. I'm going to go for Kiffin Simpson as your Road America pole sitter.
It's been rookies the last couple of years, obviously Lundqvist and Foster. So Hauger
Yes.
makes sense.
Collett. Schumacher takes pole out of nowhere. What a story that would be.
Following suit of his teammate last year.
Yeah. Stay tuned for that. And if you haven't already, we have an Indy Next debrief from Gateway. It was a little bit late, but it is 100% worth listening if you haven't already. Miles Rose, you mentioned, went from last to first. So to hear his insight into that race and kind of his mentality is absolutely fascinating. So please give him a listen. He gives some insight as well into his Indianapolis 500 plans for next year, which is really interesting to hear. You'll also hear from Josh Pearson, who finished third. And Josh is possibly one of the most insightful guests we've ever had on Indy Next Deep, or even this podcast as a whole so far. There's some insights that we really just haven't heard before, particularly from an Indy Next driver. So those two, definitely worth a listen if you've got an hour or so this week. It is a really, really good insight into kind of Indy Next to Gateway. And of course, we'll have our episode following Road America as well, which is a double header for the series. But that's it for our mid-season review. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening. And we'll see you next time.